it was a trial by fire, man. I read later that it was considered the most difficult shoot in history when a good chunk of your budget of the movie is spent to keep actors from dying. It was really an intense and fun and scary and exhilarating part of my life, and it was, the movie that started me on my path. My name's Daren Dochterman. I'm a production illustrator, concept artist, visual effects designer, and all the time sort of geek with portfolio. When I graduated high school, I realized that I wanted to do something in the movie business. I went out to USC, the University of Southern California, when I turned 18. I was born in the East, in Pennsylvania, and then we moved to suburban Chicago when I was 11, and then moved out to California when I turned 18. I figured that Los Angeles was, certainly at that time, the place to go to be in the movies and to work behind the scenes, which is what I wanted to do. One of the great things that happened when I came out to Los Angeles was that I realized that there's a bunch of people who, like Close Encounters, were drawn to this spot because of their likes and their talents and their interests. And everyone likes different things, but we all have the same passion in how we pursue them. And that was a very enlightening thing for me. I was one of the very few kids who liked the kind of stuff that I did, and it was a little bit isolating. But when I came out here, I realized that there were a lot more people who were odd like that. I started meeting them one by one and sort of gathering my little crowd of loners to sort of go out into the world of movies and entertainment. It's very encouraging that as I go through my career, that I keep meeting more people and younger people who are drawn to this same destiny. I guess my first break can be traced back to the first class that I had at USC. This class would screen a film from that year, and that year it was Back to the Future. And in that class, I met a friend of mine named Van Ling, and we sort of bonded one day when Alan Silvestri was in talking to us, because he'd done the music on Back to the Future. And they ran a sequence from Back to the Future without music. We found ourselves humming the music when there was none. So we sort of had a bonding there. And through various things that happened, he got in contact with James Cameron, who hired him as his assistant. Through that, Van started to get jobs through James Cameron, and then I started helping Van with some of these jobs. And that's the way I got to know James Cameron. And when he was starting to make The Abyss, they needed someone to come into the art department and help build some study models. And I said, I can do that. And so that's how I got my foot in. It would have been good to have been involved with someone who, had a little more promise than James Cameron did. But, you take what you can get. The Abyss, pretty much now in retrospect, was the pivot point between standard visual effects work and digital visual effects work. It's pretty much a big signpost that sort of changed the way movies are made. But then after that, the technology sort of exploded, and their ability to scan film into digital and then output it again was a big hurdle that they were able to get over. But working in the art department for 13 months as their assistant was, it was a trial by fire, man. It was my first movie ever. And, when I read later that it was considered the most difficult shoot in history, I don't know about that, but it sure is fun to think about that. I think when a good chunk of your budget of the movie is spent to keep actors from dying, I think that's, a little different than My Dinner with Andre. The thing about The Abyss was that a lot of the things that we built were practical. So much engineering had to go into just keeping the set from destroying itself when they filled the tank with water. That's kind of a different situation than you normally run across on a movie. Let alone the design work from Ron Cobb. I got to meet on that, and he was just amazing. I had been a fan of his for years and years, and it was just Les Dilley, who was a production designer on Star Wars and Empire and Superman and Raiders, all these films that I'd grown to love as a kid growing up. And I was finally getting to not only meet but work with these people that I'd heard about in the past, and it was really an intense and fun and scary and exhilarating part of my life, and it was the movie that started me on my path. I got to design the Benthic Petroleum logo, and the markings on the submersibles were mine, and I got to do some work on the one sheet for the special edition, and that was a lot of fun. So that's a really nice thing to have in my resume. Sometimes I have to deal with creative people who have very strong egos and opinions, and I just think of it. I try to think of it in a very professional way, that my job is to bring their ideas out, and sometimes it's a question of that my job is to show them what they don't like, because for some people, thinking visually is not part of their toolbox. The job is to show them what they don't like, because they can't quite picture it in their mind. And when they get to see it out in the open, finally, for the first time, and the idea crystallizes in front of them, they get to see what faults they had in their own preconceived notions of what they wanted to do. And that's just as valid as showing them something that they absolutely love. The things that influenced me early on from when I was a kid, of course, the original Star Trek was one of the, major influences of my life. When I first saw the live-action version, I thought it was absolutely great. And, of course, at that time, they had just started putting out all the toys and things, so I had the action figures and the walkie-talkie communicators, and that was a heck of a lot of fun. And also at that time was the big explosion of Planet of the Apes. They had a whole marketing thing for that too, so I had the Planet of the Apes action figures too, and that was they would sometimes fight with the Star Trek guys. So that was early influences and things that I liked. I think I was about 7 years old, and my dad took me to see 2001: A Space Odyssey in a real theater, and it was big, and it scared the life out of me. And I found that the things that scared me as a kid made me really interested in finding out, how it was done. 2001: A Space Odyssey really sort of hit me when I was extremely malleable. And so, naturally, about a year later, Star Wars opened and just, completely lopped my head off in terms of excitement and enjoyment and wonder. Did I ever imagine that I would be working on Star Trek? The original show was sort of already sort of dead and buried by the time I, came around to see it. Obviously it was something that really hit me hard when I was a kid, and so that sort of my enjoyment of it sort of helped fuel my desire to be creative and explore what I could do creatively in not only the movie business but also in my general life. I really wish that my 33-year-old self could have gone back and told my 10-year-old self, you're going to be able to do what you love and get paid moderately well at it. I can't imagine doing anything else with my professional life. I certainly can't sit in an office and do the daily grind of doing spreadsheets or things like that. That just doesn't appeal to me at all, and my psyche just couldn't handle it. In the late 90s, I got to work on the director's edition of Star Trek: The Motion Picture for Robert Wise, who had not had on the original release in 1979 test screenings or anything. They basically took wet prints to the premiere in Washington, D.C. the day before. So 18 years later, Dave Fine and Mike Matessino and I talked to Robert Wise, and he was interested in going back and sort of revisiting Star Trek the Motion Picture. His situation in the original release, it was strained. He was under a lot of pressure to deliver the film on time, and he, wasn't happy with the fact that a lot of the movie was sort of, he still considered it a rough cut. We were allowed by the studio and the home video department to reassess all those things that he wanted to change about it. Basically give it a finer cut, include some of the lifts that had been taken out, and to finish and refine some of the effects that had been planned for that film but had never made it into the final cut. So we were able to do that. We were able to get the studio to let us do almost 100 new effects shots, and I was the visual effects supervisor on it. And I brought in Foundation Imaging, who was working on some of the Star Trek TV shows at the time. They were doing all of the effects for Voyager and Deep Space Nine, to come in and work with us on Star Trek the Motion Picture. And we were able to generate visual effects that were seamlessly integrated with the effects that were done in 1979. We didn't want to go the route of the Star Wars special editions, which had a lot of additional stuff that sort of didn't necessarily gel with the feel of the 1977 release. And we didn't want to do anything that would take away from the intended narrative of the original movie. And we wanted to be able to integrate the look with it so that if you had never seen the 1979 version of Star Trek the Motion Picture, that you wouldn't even know that there was any changes done to it. It was finally released at the end of 2001. And, one of the great things that I've found in talking with people about Star Trek the Motion Picture is that a lot of them who had simply written off the movie as being boring or certainly not as interesting to them as The Wrath of Khan was, Star Trek the Motion Picture is a very different type of movie. It's much more, it has the sense of grandeur, and it's less adventure, it's more an experience. And I think that a lot of people who have now seen the director's edition, really understand that that was what was being delivered to them. And I'm very happy that I was able to take part in that. I also got a chance to work on a movie in 2004 called The Chronicles of Riddick, which was a lot of fun because it was one of the biggest art departments I've ever worked in. One of the designers on there, Matt Codd, and myself, we got to design the bad guys. But I'm really happy with the design work on that movie. It turns out to be mostly close-ups of Vin Diesel with everything blurred in the background. But that's how it goes with big movies sometimes. There were instances where I got to go back to my original analog artwork roots. I worked for director Peter Weir and production designer Bill Sandell on The Far Side of the World, Master and Commander. I got to go down to Mexico for a few months and work completely computerless. I got to work with production illustrator named George Jensen, who was actually the illustrator on Close Encounters of the Third Kind for Spielberg. He and I were doing drawings with pencil on regular drafting paper. It was a chance to sort of go old school for a period of time and really get some really nice work. And I usually hate the stuff that I do, but I'm really proud of some of the drawings I did on that because it was very fun, and I love how the movie came out. And when I first read the script, I realized, you know what, this is pretty much the closest thing to an actual new Star Trek movie that I've ever worked on. It's set on sailing ships, but it's the same story. When I first started out, I would use pencil, pen, markers, ink wash, things like that. And it was, very sort of standard 2D artwork. And I started in the late 80s and worked through the 90s. And during about the mid 90s, the computer started to become a factor in the job. And Photoshop became a tool that illustrators and concept designers would use. When I started to work on the Star Trek The Motion Picture Director's Edition, I had started using Lightwave. And Foundation Imaging, which was the company that I brought in to help with that, they were all Lightwave. So as things progressed, directors just began asking for pretty much completed frames from their film before they shot their film, because the pencil sketches weren't cutting it. Jim Cameron wanted to put his director's cut out and call it the special edition. When that was done, it came around time that Van Ling, my friend who I had met in USC, was basically Jim Cameron's head of production, and he said, you did a comp when we were working on the show. Took one of Richard Foreman, the set photographer, had this amazing shot of Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio playing Lindsay down among the rubble of Deep Core with a big light in front of her, and it was just an amazing image. And I told the publicist at the time, you got to use this for the one sheet, and they sort of said, oh, that's very nice. You go on now and do whatever it is you do. But when it came time for the special edition, Van remembered this, and I had done a couple of sketches of this idea, and Van brought it to Jim and said, hey, why don't we do this for the special edition? Jim thought it was great. They had a very limited theatrical release, I think, in New York and Los Angeles before the Laserdisc came out. And pretty much every release of the film on video since then has had that one sheet on it, and I'm really happy about that. The past few years, I've been doing quite a few large, concept design movies that I've been lucky enough to work on. I spent nearly 2.5 years working on a film called Robopocalypse for Steven Spielberg that got shelved at the last minute. But we did a lot of concept design work on that, and it was very interesting. It would make a very interesting movie. After that, I got to work on doing some prop work on Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and I got to design a bunch of Batman's equipment, which, that's another thing. As a kid, I loved Batman, and so that was a really fun thing to be able to work on. This year's been great. I got to do a little bit of work on Star Trek Beyond. I got to work on the sequel to Independence Day, and I just finished working on a project called Passengers that everyone will hear about in about a year. I'm coming up on almost 30 years of working in the industry, and I was lucky to get into the industry at the time when a few of the old guys were still working. And now I've sort of turned into one of the old guys. But I think one of the good things is that I try to maintain my enjoyment and my excitement for the job, and a sense of gratefulness for being able to do something that I really enjoy. And I hope that in the future, and I tell this to my students too, and it's very important that what you do, you find some joy in somehow. And I consider myself extremely lucky to have been able to take something that I enjoy and be able to work with people that also feel that. And that'll carry you through, I think.